the London Underground, a vast network of tunnels that millions pass through every single day, a part of the daily grind that we barely even think about. But beneath the surface, beneath the rush and noise, there's something much older and far darker. For years, there have been whispers, stories of shadows moving where they shouldn't, of footsteps echoing in empty stations. People go missing, apparitions flicker for just a moment, then vanish. Are these just stories? Urban legends? Or is there something far more sinister lurking beneath the city streets? Tonight, we step into the ghostly underworld of the London Underground, where history and horror collide, where the past hasn't stayed buried, and those who enter may never leave the same.
This is Bethnal Green.
On the night of March 3rd, 1943, panic swept across London as air raid sirens filled the air. The war was raging, and everyone knew that when the siren sounded, it meant one thing: take cover. But for the 173 men, women, and children who fled to the safety of Bethnal Green Underground Station, that night would mark the end of their lives. That night, the station was being used as an air raid shelter. Like so many others across London, people poured into the station, rushing down the narrow staircase that led underground, desperate to escape what they thought was an impending airstrike. But no bombs would fall that night. Instead, the real danger lay at the top of those stairs. In the confusion, a woman tripped near the entrance. Within seconds, the crowd surged forward, unaware of what had happened. One by one, people fell, creating a human pile at the foot of the stairs. Those still outside had no idea that the path ahead was blocked, and they kept pushing forward. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. 173 people were crushed to death. The youngest victim was just 5 months old. But it wasn't just the physical weight of the bodies that crushed them. It was the fear, the panic, the overwhelming sense that this could be the end. And in many ways, it was. Since that night, many people claim that something unnatural lingers in Bethnal Green Station. People who walk the stairs late at night report hearing faint sobbing. Others say they've felt something brush past them, only to turn and find nothing there. And then there are the sounds, terrifying, unmistakable. One station attendant, working the late shift, described hearing the unmistakable sound of children crying. At first, he thought maybe a family had been left behind on the platform. But when he walked through the station, it was empty. As he made his way back up the stairs, the cries grew louder, louder, until it felt like they were right behind him. He turned around, heart pounding in his chest. And there was nothing, only the silence of an empty station. But that wasn't the end of it. Many station workers refuse to walk those steps alone at night. They say it feels as though they're being watched, followed. Some even claim to have seen shadowy figures at the far end of the platform, standing still, staring up at them from the tracks. But perhaps the most disturbing story comes from a woman who was rushing to catch the last train. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. She heard a soft whisper, a voice, faint but clear, right next to her ear. The voice said just one word: help. She froze, heart racing, but when she turned around, no one was there, just the dark, empty station behind her. She sprinted to the platform, but the feeling followed her, like eyes on the back of her neck. She never took the underground again after that. Bethnal Green Station has become a place of fear for many, but it's not just the memory of that tragic night that haunts it. Some say the souls of those lost are still down there.
The next station is Covent Garden.
Covent Garden Station, a bustling, vibrant hub in the heart of London's West End. But beneath the busy platforms and echoing corridors lies a different story. A story of something far older than the station itself. A story that still lingers in the shadows of the tunnels below. Since the 1950s, employees and commuters alike have reported encountering a mysterious figure. He's always described the same way. A tall man, dressed in an Edwardian suit, complete with a long coat and top hat. He appears suddenly, always in the same spot, near the entrance to the Piccadilly line platform, then vanishes just as quickly. It's said that this ghostly figure is the spirit of William Terrace, a once famous actor from the Victorian era. He was well loved by the public, a celebrated figure of the London stage, but his life came to a tragic, untimely end. On the night of December 16th, 1897, Terrace was making his way to the Adelphi Theatre, just around the corner from Covent Garden Station. He was in good spirits, ready for another performance. But as he approached the stage door, he was attacked by a former colleague, an embittered actor named Richard Archer Prince. Terrace was stabbed repeatedly in the chest and stomach. He collapsed on the cold, cobblestone street, surrounded by shocked bystanders. His final words, whispered through bloodied lips, were a plea to his wife. "I will come back." Since his murder, many believe Terrace's spirit has been unable to find peace. Covent Garden Station stands on what was once the site of the old Adelphi Theatre, the very place where he spent much of his career. It seems fitting, then, that his restless soul might wander these tunnels, still seeking a stage, still haunted by the memory of that fatal night. But his presence isn't just a fleeting glimpse. For decades, station workers have experienced something far more chilling. One night, a station attendant locking up after the last train had departed felt a cold draft rush past him. He turned, expecting to see a stray commuter, but instead, he saw the figure of a man. The man was standing at the end of the corridor, dressed in Victorian clothing, just as he's always been described. The attendant froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a long moment, the figure just stood there, staring back at him, before turning and walking through a solid wall. Another worker, a few years later, reported a similar experience. This time, the figure appeared near the elevator shafts. The worker heard footsteps approaching, but when he turned, there was no one there. The footsteps grew louder, echoing down the empty corridor. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw him, tall, distinguished, his coat flowing as if caught in an unseen breeze. The worker called out, thinking it was a prank, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, he slowly lifted a gloved hand, pointing towards the exit. The worker felt a chill run down his spine, but when he blinked, the figure was gone. These encounters have left many station workers and late-night travelers shaken. Some refuse to walk the tunnels alone after dark. Others have quit their jobs altogether, unwilling to face the possibility of another meeting with William Terrace. One night, a young woman waiting for the last train home reported seeing a man sitting alone on a bench. He was dressed in a long coat and hat, much like the descriptions of Terry's, but something about him felt off. His face was too pale, his eyes too distant. She turned to ask him for the time, but before she could speak, the lights flickered, and when they came back on, the bench was empty. The man was gone, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her. Whether it's the spirit of William Terrace or some other restless entity, one thing is clear. Covent Garden Station is home to more than just commuters and trains.
This is Bank. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Bank Station. It's one of London's oldest and busiest underground stations, but deep within its corridors, a ghost from the city's dark past walks among the commuters. Some say you can hear her sobbing late at night. Others have even seen her, clad in black, her face hidden beneath a heavy veil. But she's not just any ghost. She's the Black Nun of Bank, a spectral figure haunted by grief. And her tragic story begins with a notorious execution. In 1811, a man named Philip Whitehead worked as a clerk at the Bank of England. He led a modest life, but one fateful day, it all came crashing down. Whitehead was arrested and charged with forgery, a crime punishable by death. Desperate to save himself, he pleaded innocence, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His trial was swift, and he was sentenced to hang. On the cold morning of January 29th, 1812, Whitehead was taken to Newgate Prison's gallows. His sister, Sarah Whitehead, remained unaware of her brother's fate. She lived a quiet life, completely unaware of the dark storm brewing over Philip's head. That is, until the day she came to visit him at the Bank of England, only to be met with cold, unfeeling stares from the clerks. Sarah entered the building, expecting to see her brother at his desk, but instead, the staff informed her that Philip was gone. At first, they were kind, careful not to mention his execution. They told her he had left, but as the days turned into weeks, Sarah kept coming back, searching for answers. As her inquiries grew more persistent, the truth finally came out. Sarah learned that her beloved brother had been hanged for forgery, and in that moment, something inside her broke. She was overcome with grief and disbelief. From that day on, she returned to the bank every single day, dressed in mourning clothes, asking for her brother. "Have you seen Philip?" she would ask. "When will my brother return?" Her endless search turned her into a figure of both pity and fear. She wandered the streets near the bank, asking strangers about Philip, always hoping to hear that he had somehow survived. The staff began to dread her daily visits, and over time, they referred to her simply as the Black Nun, a name that would follow her even after death. Soon after Sarah's death, the sightings began. Late at night, as the station was closing, staff members reported seeing a woman in black slowly pacing the tunnels beneath Bank Station. She would appear without a sound, her veil hiding her face, her hands clasped tightly together, as if in prayer. Some say that when she's near, the air turns bitterly cold, and you can hear the faint rustling of her gown as she moves through the station. Others have reported hearing her soft sobs echoing through the tunnels, asking the same question she asked in life: "Have you seen my brother?" One chilling account comes from a maintenance worker who was working late one evening. He had just finished his shift and was heading toward the exit when he saw her, a woman in black, standing at the end of the platform, her veil flowing as if caught by an invisible breeze. She didn't move, she didn't make a sound, but as he approached, she raised her head ever so slightly, revealing a pale, ghostly face beneath the veil. Paralyzed with fear, the worker turned and ran. When he looked back, the woman was gone, but the cold air remained, lingering in the tunnel long after she had disappeared. He quit his job the very next day. Another report comes from a group of station attendants who were locking up for the night. They heard the unmistakable sound of a woman weeping coming from one of the deserted tunnels. At first they thought it might be a lost commuter, but as they followed the sound, they found nothing, just an empty tunnel, bathed in shadows. The crying stopped abruptly, leaving them in total silence. Many have tried to explain these sightings as nothing more than imagination, echoes of a tragic story passed down through the years. But those who've encountered the Black Nun will tell you otherwise. They'll tell you that the sorrow in her eyes was all too real, that the chill in the air was something beyond this world. To this day, people claim to see her wandering the tunnels of Bank Station, forever searching, forever waiting for a brother who will never return. The London Underground is a labyrinth of dark history, where every station, every tunnel, seems to hide a lingering presence. The very walls seem to echo with the stories of those trapped between this world and the next. And so, as you ride the train late at night, remember, there's more beneath the city than just tracks and trains. The past is closer than you think, and if you feel that icy breath on the back of your neck, you might want to check if you're still alone.